we go.
That's great. Well, it's great to have all of you join this panel. As Bindu said, I'm Amit. I lead a engagement platform company called 1-800-Flowers, and really excited to join this conversation. I think we have had a terrific set of speakers in the morning, but I always joke that, where the artificial meets the intelligence is when you talk to the operators who are really trying to, make sense of this great sort of research and tools being created. But ultimately, it's what is happening in the trenches that is of a lot of interest to at least the folks I talk to and other practitioners. So I thought, we'll keep it really conversational in the next sort of half an hour, 45 minutes, and really riff about what I think is probably the most critical topic for companies of all size. And we are very lucky today to have a mix of both large, complex enterprises and small and medium-sized sort of growth-oriented companies. But if you really talk to the C-suite down to the main street, growth is everyone's business. And especially as we come out of a very transformative year, growth is going to become a more important sort of focus area for companies of all size. So really what we wanted to tease out today with the panel that we have is, how does AI really supercharge, catalyze, or create wrinkles in this growth trajectory? So I'm going to start off with a very simple question to the panelists, to introduce themselves, and then maybe give us the AI eureka or the non-eureka moment that you have had either personally, professionally, within your teams, etc. So maybe you can start with Joseph from Autodesk. Go ahead, Joseph.
Thanks, Amit. I'm Joseph. I've been in the marketing space for the last 20 years. My eureka moment came about a decade ago when we had a consultant on board, and she had put together 3 or 4 really large data sets. All of the digital interactions we've had as a company, all of the web interactions that we'd had on our .com properties, all of our sales interactions and all our physical interactions, both CRM data as well as customer engagement data. And this was a decade ago, and she brought it together. She made some predictions about what we thought were going to be accounts that were likely to either purchase or close business in the next quarter. And for 2 quarters in a row, she hit the predictions of 70 to 80% of the accounts that we were going to hit. And we went over to sales with that, and we validated it, and we saw the business in the funnel. But what was really interesting, literally a decade ago, we didn't have all of the sophisticated tools that we have now. Well, that particular consultant went on to start a company called 6 Sense, which is still around today. They just got their D round about 2 months ago, and $125 million worth of investment and a $2.1 billion valuation. So in less than a decade, we went from a concept and idea to an ID graph that she was able to build that actually is now resold to lots and lots of companies. I think we're just going to continue to see that kind of sea change, and I see a potential for us, particularly in go-to-market, sales, marketing, and customer success, to utilize these kinds of models for everything that we're doing relative to customer engagement and driving growth.
That's great. That's a great story also of sort of things coming full circle in a relatively sort of, I would say growing field still to a large extent. Minka, tell us about yourself a little bit and your eureka moment.
Sure. Good morning, Amit. Thank you for the invitation. And so I'm Michael Kolmiche, Director Executive at Belcorp. Belcorp is a beauty care company based in Miami. We have operation in all South America. And I would say 2, 3 years ago, we started a data and analytic journey, trying to implement some interesting models into business to increase the adoption and to get a very high impact on the result of the business. No? So I would say we started 2 years ago, and now we still working on the evolution with very interesting results. So that's a part that's from my side and what is Belcorp, who we are and what we're doing.
That's great. Thanks for keying us in on that, Mika. Shashi, I'll go over to you. You are boldly representing sort of the non-complex big company side. Would love to know a little bit about Leap and your own Eureka moment.
Yeah, thank you, Amit, and great to be on this panel. You're right, I probably represent a lot more of the smaller company size. I'm Vice President Marketing at Leap. I've been in the technology field for about 20 years, more than 10 years in marketing. I also teach digital marketing at Georgetown. My Eureka moment came about probably 3 to 4 years ago when, I think one of the things that marketers kind of learned is the use of database, like Joseph said, probably more than 10 years ago. But to analyze the data and try to get some meaning out of it took a very long time. So 2 to 3 years, we used another small company to try to build a database of customer segments and wanted to identify the customer segments that is the fastest growing. Our intuition told us that these are probably business owners, 45 to 55 years old, been in business for 30 years. But after appending a lot of demographic data and the interactions with us, we actually discovered our fastest growing customer segment was women entrepreneurs, 35 to 45 years, very digitally savvy and knew what to do. So it was a huge seismic change for us in terms of messaging and how to talk to this particular segment, which it would have taken us a couple of years to discover. So we used some open source AI engines for that. That was my Eureka moment.
And I know we have had like a lot of deep research discussion, but I think for a lot of operators, when you say the Eureka moment was just a model, an intuition, then coming to life. I know I get very excited by that as well. So maybe my opening question is to Joseph and Mika a little bit. As you are both sort of leading sort of data and marketing at pretty large, complex enterprises. Talk to us a little bit about the practice of AI and where do you see sort of it being able to catalyze growth for your teams and companies?
From my point of view, every interaction is a data point for us that anywhere in the life cycle, whether it's in the acquisition phase, the expansion phase, or in some kind of renewal and extension phase, all of those interactions brought together gives us lots and lots of signals as to what's going to happen next. Whether a customer we're trying to acquire is going to turn into some ACV, or whether that ACV is going to renew in a year or 3 years from now. So knowing all of that and being able to connect all of those data points is a pretty unique opportunity for us in marketing, because we can assist both on the sales side, we can assist on the marketing side, but we can also assist in the customer success side. When I interviewed for this job, I asked the CEO, what would you like to get out of what we do? And his response to me was, I want to be able to have really good visibility of where a customer is in their life cycle and be able to do that on a repeatable basis. And that's really what we're trying to do, to figure out how they're moving through that life cycle. The other area that's really interesting for us right now is that there's so much data available that it's actually a struggle for marketers to be able to interpret the data, make decisions, ask the questions of the data in a way that the dashboards deliver it to them. And so we're actually playing around with natural language processing so that we can just ask questions of the data and to be able to feed it back based on, simple questions that marketers have. So a lot of it is about lifecycle. A lot of it also is about how we actually engage with the data.
Those are two very good points, Joseph. I especially liked your point about how to tease out and get to a better signal versus noise ratio, because I think at least the complexity I see a lot in the C-suite is around abundance of data, but paucity of signal state from that data. So those are very good sort of starting points. Mika, I'll turn over to you. In terms of, you said you have Latin American operations, international operations, there's a lot of, I would say, data fidelity, governance, and other issues. But even if you take a step back, how do you guys think about leveraging AI for growth, and how is that getting played out in sort of in situ within the company?
Yes, in Latin America, we are maybe few step back if we compare with versus some other region in the country. But I would say that we have be able to apply a very interesting good practice supporting by strategic partners. So we are very both our competitors locally, and I would say that today we have a very measurable impact in the business implementing data and analytics or advanced analytics platform solution. So this is what I can say about our experience in South America.
Got it. And then Shashi, if I can turn over to you, generally when I talk or advise sort of smaller companies, they have to deal with a lot more ambiguity and a lot more sort of siloed data at times, or just thin data. Within this sort of realm, like, would love to understand where you are seeing sort of leverageability for AI, and what has been your experience in real time.
Just with working with small businesses for the last 10-15 years, I think there are different levels of businesses and different levels of data. And I used to be part of the restaurant industry at one time, and somebody, maybe it's 10-15 years ago, everybody said, like, you need to collect data about our restaurants. So they started all these feedback cards with email addresses and everything, and they did not know what to do with it, right? But I'm seeing more and more savvy startups that are helping restaurants identify like, what is the predictability of this customer coming back, how much revenue can they earn with a customer. Very similarly, another use case is doctors who now seem to understand who their ideal customer is and what kind of upsells they can give based on this. The only thing that they don't understand is the SaaS providers already have AI built in. So it's not like they are going to hire somebody to build an AI model for them. So just like I think Joseph talked about 6sense, there are other providers that are kind of innately adding AI into this. And when you talk about natural language processing, one of the things that I used to teach my students about 10 years ago was the ability for Facebook, or now even for Google Analytics. And I'm only talking about like very basic using natural language queries to find out like whose birthday it is. Like if you put like who in my friends has a birthday this month, almost very similarly to that, and get back an answer. I predict there will be faster growth now with so many companies adopting SaaS technology, there'll be faster growth. We have seen that at Leap, especially with the last 14 months, how customers have adopted AI and not only figuring out who is the best candidate for financing, right up to like how to communicate with people. So on one side, you have all these like earth-shattering use of AI with in the medical field and self-driven autos. And on the small business side, like you said, Amit, it's very small use cases, but at the same time, something that they learn. And once they see a profit in it, they're going to invest more.
That's a great pivot, Suresh. I want to shift a little bit now to uh, just the real life experience of how do you adopt and get started on this AI journey. Joseph, would love to get your sort of perspective on, when I talk to a lot of people, generally either AI is the next best thing since sliced bread and nothing else is required, or it is, generally shipped out to this team of, data scientists, etc., internally. But as a leader, and especially, sort of feeding into the C-suite, how do you get this ship in motion, and what are the kind of sort of models or things that you guys are looking at, working on, and ruling out?
Yeah, so the important thing for this part of the conversation is that we try and avoid really talking a lot about AI at all to the C-suite as to how we're actually achieving what we're achieving. A lot of the conversation is about the use cases. What are we trying to achieve, right? Is it that we're trying to improve our renewal rates? Are we looking at onboarding issues that we may have with a particular solution? Are we losing to competitors? Are people dropping out of the funnel? So all of those conversations are business conversations. They're not AI or ML conversations. So part of our challenge in a large company like ours is to think about, okay, what are the key things we can enable in the business, and then work our way back and say, okay, how could we use models to predict what's likely to happen next? One good example that I would love to see, we're still working on it, is I would love to be able to see all of the content a particular company or an individual within a company is consuming through their journey, and be able to determine what kind of content creates a conversion, creates the next move, what content makes people drop out or not even go any further. That kind of work really helps us optimize the discussion with the content team. So it's very use case driven and very business focused. How we do it is, up to the scientists and companies like Abacus who we work with to be able to score and build the models in the back room.
And Joseph, just building on that, does it require a lot of internal coalescing around sort of, data, looking at things in a newer way? Because one of the challenges I've found is that it's sometimes easier to get a POC started, where people can consume it in a bite size. But when you really start talking about the implications of looking at things in new ways, where things run a little bit wrinkly.
Yeah, look, it's an issue, and the challenge sometimes is to go from POC to scale, right? And how do you make that transition? The good news on our front, and Anup and my team has done a phenomenal job with this. He's stitched together a lot of data in the enterprise. So 20 plus systems, everything from digital data, entitlement data, product usage data, customer interaction data, sales and CRM data, all of that brought together into a massive data store. So we've got the data available. Now it's turning it into analytics and then using the models on the analytics to be able to scale. There was a time where I would have built an entire data science engine. In fact, speaking to professors of analytics schools around the country, I would say, look, I'll take all the data scientists to build out our capability. Today, there actually exists the capability where we can API it to a company like Abacus, have them do the scoring for us, and then take the scores back. Because ultimately what we want is the answer. We don't need to have to build out all of that capability internally, but we do need to stitch the data together, and that's really where my engineering teams are focused.
And Shashi, when you sort of look at building out internal use cases, is sort of the defined business problem the starting point, or it is more around opportunistic places where you think your customer base is looking for an upliftment of the signal? How does that process occur in sort of the SMB side?
Yeah, I can talk about just a use case that we had at Leap. And I agree with Joseph that we start with the business problem first. I mean, I joined Leap about a year ago, and our number one problem was the sales capacity was not equal to the amount of leads that we were producing. And that's a problem because manually or using data scoring techniques, we were not getting the results that we did. So it is almost very coincidental that, and we probably, I mean, it'll take us a few years before we start building a whole data engineering team that probably Joseph or Mika has. So for us, this was like being able to outsource the creation of the model using AI to bring back a different scoring model than just engagement, right? And just like we talked about the life cycle, like the life cycle of a prospect, how do you know that your sales cycle is matching the business cycle? And you know that by the number of signals that need to be analyzed and learned every time. So that's why we are very thrilled about this. We will start using it to discover which customer signals indicate that they will churn out more. So that's the use case that we have for this business. I mean, it could move on to advising other businesses to see, like, for example, we serve home improvement contractors. They spend a lot of time and money on talking to homeowners. And if they're able to discern and score using AI, which homeowners are most likely to buy and what is the best, I don't know if it's dynamic pricing that they can get from the model. So these are the two solutions that we'll seek using AI when we don't have in-house ability. And very happy with the work that we've been doing with the backers.
That's great to hear. And speaking of dynamic pricing, we have a question in sort of the chat asking and talking about that. So we might return to it in the Q&A session. But Mika, turning on to you, would love to tease out, how do you, I mean, you are leading more on the sort of the data side, how do you roll out AI and ML, and are there any particular ML journeys internally that you guys are working on?
Yes, indeed, in Belcorp, we have an analytics center of excellence that has a very large team of 30 data scientists, machine learning engineer, data engineer, and data analysts. So before the COVID started, we had initiated the implementation of several models related to personalization, forecast optimization, among many others. But COVID has only accelerated this implementation, taking into account that we had to consider that fluctuation due to the pandemic will impact our model. So this is how we adjust our not only way of working, but we adjust the information we need to consider into our models or into our analytics to adjust to the situation we are living in that moment. No,
that's a very interesting point. And in a recent podcast that I did, one of the things that struck me and then I talked about was that, really AI and ML are mindset issues and skill set issues at the same time. But, generally what I find is the mindset is still where a lot of wrinkles are. So Joseph, turning to that, like, when you are trying internally to really bring to life these use cases, is it generally dissipated sort of set of decisioning that has to come together, or do you feel that now there is enough buying internally around solving the use cases using, AI as a service, or is there still a preference for sort of saying in large companies that we should try to do this on our own?
I don't think there's a sense of we should try and do this on our own. But there is this mindset issue, which, let me try and address that a little bit in terms of the thinking. In general, you have sort of three groups of personas within the environment. You have the data people who feel very, very comfortable having technology conversations and feel right at home in a session, in a set of sessions like today. And then you have the business people who, if they got onto this panel and listen to some of the earlier speakers, would have been terrified out of the room because they can't understand the equations or the language or whatever you're talking about. It makes business people sometimes feel a bit inadequate, right? The data people don't necessarily want to always talk to the business people because they just want to really get deep into what they do and the models and how they work and what's next. So you actually need this interpretive layer. I call it the connector who does the translation, who are not scared of data, right? And can speak to a business person and make that translation happen. And the more you can bring those kinds of people around this work, the more likely that the business cases will be solved by smart predictive models. But those people are rare and hard to find, and you want to hang on to them when you get them.
Shashi, you have something to say on that?
Yeah, it just reminded me of some advice I'd like to give data scientists and others. Is it's very difficult to, like Joseph said, so some of the earlier panels were really fantastic, but it's scary to somebody who has not taken the time to at least learn the basics. I think the flip side to get more business from AI companies is to talk the language so that people understand that this isn't too far out from what you need. So that would be the advice I would give some of the scientists, to say like, hey, make sure you tell people that you're going to solve that problem than anything else.
And Shashi, do you find that, in your own sort of workplace, in your own organization, is it generally a single-threaded decision that you are able to push, or it requires a lot of internal consensus, and is sort of the mindset and the skill set an equal issue, or do you feel it's a preponderance of the mindset, even if you can assemble the skill set?
You need a lot of internal campaigning and at least the proof of concept, because I think it's such a fast pace that people are very familiar with what they know and what they do every day. So when you introduce something new, they might think of it like, hey, it's cool, but it needs to solve their problem also. So that's why I think we have to take the time to explain to them and what's in it for them.
Right. I also think, this brings up a very fascinating sort of vector. If I think back, I started my career at McKinsey as an analyst, and we spent 2 weeks just, doing a deep dive on Excel, because it was such an important tool, both for sort of analysis and then obviously communicating in a certain way, right? I wonder whether 5-10 years from the road, or even earlier, we are going to see a set of AI tools being rolled out to every employee, because you can make better decisions, or you can make better productive outcomes with your cognitive sort of throughput capacity, right? So I would love to, maybe in the last couple of minutes, talk about where do you see sort of the trajectory of AI moving, and would love to know both from sort of what you hope to see and where you think it is likely going to be. So we'll start with you, Shashi, in terms of laying that out.
I mean, just a simple use case that people don't realize, they're actually using a huge amount of AI and AI engines. Like there's a tool called Otter.ai that transcribes probably the Zoom meeting also. people use tools like Grammarly for their text, or if they use Microsoft's editor. So they're already using AI. So I think the challenge in most people is to get away from being scared and I advise my students at Georgetown to actually go and study a little bit more. It's for everyone. It's not something that's going to take your job away, but it's something that you're going to use in your daily life, whether you're ordering a pizza or you're looking at a huge amount of data. On the flip side, I think technology is going to become easier and easier. So my advice to everybody is you learn throughout your life except for a short break in school. So I think it's very important for everybody to keep that in mind.
We'll move over to you, Mika. Where do you think sort of the future holds for us?
Yes, well, value change. At Belcorp, we have implemented, as an example, just to mention one example, we have implemented or deployed the augmented reality platform, which we call beauty mirror type solution, so that our consumer can try a product before buying it. No, we have also implemented algorithms that allow us to offer personalized experience, for example, demand forecasting, personalization offer for resellers, digital segmentation based on web navigation and transactional data. So all of those implementation are just example of what we can do thanks to the AI and the impact we are being able to see in business are very, very huge. No? And as I was mentioning before, the main point to get successful implementation is the alignment between technology and business. No, to be completely aligned on the main objective for the company.
That's a great set of observations. Joseph, turning on to you, would love to get a sense of where do you think things are going, and then particularly within Autodesk as well.
Yeah, I think where things are going is that today we gather the data, we stitch it all together, we score it, we give it back to a knowledge worker, call it a marketer or a salesperson or a customer success agent. They evaluate that data in some kind of dashboard, and they make some decisions and they make some choices, and they perform some kind of action. So that's kind of the general workflow today. I see a lot more happening where the data gets scored, we make decisions, and we automate what the actions are likely to be in some kind of software. Whether it's an engagement piece of software, whether it's something on the .com site, whether it's a content offer, whether it's a pricing move, all of those choices are what I'd call the ability for us to actually automate decision-making and allow the knowledge worker to be more creative in the way they think about experiments, or think about offers, or think about next best action in terms of differentiating from a competitor. So what we'd like to do is to move up that stack of decision automation as being kind of the next generation of what we do, where a lot of our engagement software can make the choices. And as mentioned before, there's a lot of AI built into these engagement engines now. We should be able to leverage that, with what we're learning.
Those are great set of observations. What we have seen on our own end, I think reflecting on what I've heard from all three of you, is that, look, I think it has become pretty imperative for companies to get started on leveraging AI for growth. Because I think the other vectors of growth, what we have seen is that they are largely copyable, or the time function to leverage them is constantly shrinking. But what do I mean by that? Like, a competitor can copy your app, they can copy your website, etc. But I think understanding customer journey, understanding internal processes to make things better and make yourself more competitive, I think really requires a partnership. And I see sort of this AI outcome more of a journey. So having partners that are sophisticated in sort of providing those inputs over time, actually, to what Joseph, Sashi, Mika, all of you guys were saying, really frees up people to do what they have been hired to do. I so often survey my team and ask them a year after they have joined, like, are you really doing what you are hired to do? And if not, then we need to reflect on that as well, right? Like, why are we setting those expectations? But the two things that I heard, which I think is very important for all of the colleagues out here to appreciate, and I think it comes with a lot of wisdom on this panel, is the importance of pulling together sort of the internal stakeholders and really getting started on this. Because I think every day lost where you are not in AI ML, you're pretty much opening up a vector of attack from, it need not even be a well-funded, amped up competitor. Just the fact that they have started on this journey, I think will create a very huge moat over time, which is not that easy to copy and just make sense of in the short run. So I think in the last 5 minutes, I would love to, Bindu, if there are questions, or Taylor, if there are questions from the crowd, would be happy to take on and engage the panelists. The one question I'll throw out there and start with maybe to you, Joseph, is in general, do you find that the kind of problems that should be thrown at ML AI in the realm of the business problems that you talked about, are they mostly bite-sized things, or are you taking the more complex one? Because I think sometimes what happens is people think because AI ML is so incredible as a technology, let's give it the most difficult problems, which generally have no chance of succeeding, even if you threw all the computational power. So where do you find that equilibrium?
Yeah, what I like to do is to think about what this would look like. There's an old saying, design the future from the future, not from where you are today. So I like to kind of fast forward and say, what is this going to look like 3-5 years from now? What is this going to look like a year from now? And then come back and look at the bite-sized chunks on how to get there and be very practical, because you don't get a year's worth of money or 3 years worth of money to go and build that end state. It just doesn't happen anymore. What happens is that you've got to earn it along the way. And so you pick off small use cases that you can show ROI, and then you get this acceleration effect. And before you know it, a year from now, you've not only delivered on that, but you've added a bunch of additional use cases. So I think you've got to do both. You've got to have the big picture that's really complex and hard to do, but then you also got to do little chunks to get you there.
Sashi, is it the same on your end?
I love that way of thinking. You wrote it down, design the future from the future. And like, for example, in our case, the scoring is just the beginning. I mean, I think to both your comments, Joseph's and Mika's comments, like, we want people to do the job that they were hired for. And AI is going to help them, especially when we're going to use this. Our next project is in marketing. So once we have the sales process and the prospect journey scoring mapped out, our next thing is to use it in marketing. So that is use case number 2. Number 3 could very well be churn, or maybe offer a service to our customers. So there are a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I would say that's what I love about the evolution of journey. On our own end, we sort of started with, working on a couple of skunkworks type projects, but then quickly realized that there are even internal consumers. For example, our forecasting department, we are in the perishable business. So there is a lot of complexity around that, right? And traditionally, that has not been thought of. We started from the marketing side to bring sort of this AI as a service stack to those stakeholders as well. And that has been internally, it wins you, as you were saying, Sashi, a few more converts as you are canvassing sort of both resourcing and sort of scarcity outcomes. But I think we are about at time. And I really appreciate, I know I learned a lot from this conversation and love sort of the diversity of perspectives. I know all of us are in some way, shape or form, big supporters of AI and ML. And I think, hopefully this talk has inspired others to get started on this journey as well. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Shashi, Mika, Joseph. This was a pleasure talking to all three of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit, for moderating. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.